Imagine walking into a cave with a steel door behind you. No clocks, no windows, no phone. The only voice you'll hear for a month is your own. You don't know what time it is. You don't know what day it is. And from the moment the door shuts, your body starts doing something it hasn't done in roughly 300,000 years. It starts losing track of time in a much deeper sense than just losing your watch. In 1962, a 23-year-old French geologist named Michel Siffre lowered himself into an underground glacier in the Alps with books, food, a sleeping bag, and one bulb. No watch, no idea when the sun came up or went down above him. His only link to the surface was a phone line. He used to report when he woke, when he ate, and when he slept. The team upstairs refused to tell him the time or the date. They just logged his calls and waited. He'd planned to stay 63 days. When the team finally called down to say it was over, he was sure they were lying. He thought only 35 days had passed. He had lost almost a month of his life inside his own head, and he had no idea. His mind, cut off from the sun, had quietly been stretching every hour into something longer. His body had drifted out of sync with the planet. What Siffre had really stumbled into wasn't a glitch in his head. It was a glimpse of how your body actually keeps time and what happens when the signal it's been using for millions of years just stops arriving. Above the place where your optic nerves cross, there's a cluster of around 20,000 neurons called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. That's your master clock. Every cell in your body, liver and skin and heart, and immune cells, runs on a roughly 24-hour cycle. But the cells themselves don't know what time it is. They know what the master clock tells them. And the master clock mostly knows what your eyes tell it, which is mostly information about light. Light hits a specific group of retinal cells, called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, which were only really pinned down in the early 2000s. They don't help you see anything. Their job is to tell your brain whether the world outside is bright or dark. When sunlight hits them, they fire, and that suppresses melatonin, the hormone that drags you towards sleep. When the light goes, melatonin rises, and you start to feel tired in that quiet, heavy way. That doesn't really feel like a chemical decision, even though it is one. In total darkness, the whole system loses its anchor. Within a week underground, Siffre was already drifting. With no sunlight to reset it, his internal clock didn't run on 24 hours. It ran on something more like 25, then 26, then sometimes much longer. He'd feel like he'd had a normal day, eaten 3 meals, worked, written in his journal, gone to bed, and on the surface. 2 days would have gone by, sometimes more. Later studies repeated the experiment in tightly controlled labs, with the same basic result. The human circadian rhythm, with no sunlight, doesn't politely stay at 24 hours. It stretches. Some volunteers ended up on something close to a 36-hour cycle, sleeping 12 to 14 hours, and staying awake for 22. And they all reported feeling fine. Their bodies had simply rewritten the length of a day. That's only the start of it. By the second week, the hormone picture changes too. Cortisol, which usually spikes just before you wake up, flattens out. The clean morning surge that gets you out of bed disappears because your body has stopped trying to predict a morning that never comes. Testosterone and growth hormone, both tied to deep sleep, start to wobble. The immune system, which uses circadian rhythm to schedule its housekeeping, gets sloppier. Inflammation creeps up, wounds heal more slowly, and you wouldn't necessarily notice any of it from the inside. The eyes change as well. In total darkness, the rod cells responsible for low-light vision become hypersensitive. After about 2 weeks, your eyes can pick up individual photons. A match struck in a dark room is genuinely painful. The chemistry that normally protects you from bright light has run down because there's been nothing to protect against, and people coming out of long darkness experiments often can't tolerate normal indoor lighting for hours afterward. The part that gets to me, though, is what happens to your mind around day 14 in almost every long-term darkness or isolation study. The same thing shows up. Subjects start to feel watched. They hear footsteps. They sense someone in the chamber with them. Siffre wrote about it in his journal. He didn't think someone was actually there. He just couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone. He ended up having long conversations with a small spider that had wandered into the cave. When it died, he cried for hours. It's not psychosis. It's a fairly well-documented thing now, sometimes called perceptual release or sensory deprivation hallucination. When you starve the brain of input, it doesn't go quiet. It fills the gap from the inside. Researchers at Maastricht University ran controlled experiments in pitch-dark rooms and found that perfectly healthy volunteers with no mental illness in their history started seeing things within about 15 minutes. Faces, geometric patterns, shapes that move. After 2 weeks of darkness, the hallucinations get more elaborate. Music, whole scenes playing out on a wall. The visual cortex, with nothing real to model, builds something from memory and imagination, and serves it up as if it's real. The time distortion sits underneath all of this. The longer you're in the dark, the less you can trust your sense of duration. People in extended isolation routinely think half as much time has passed as actually has. Someone who's been underground for 30 days will swear it's been 15 and they're not pretending. Their brain has lost the scaffolding it normally uses to count days, which is mostly just sunrises. Time, when you really look at how the brain handles it, isn't measured from the inside. It's reconstructed from external rhythms, and when those rhythms vanish, time goes soft. Cipher's second long stay in a Texas cave in 1972 ran 6 months. About halfway through, his memory started slipping. He couldn't recall what he'd done 2 days earlier. Writing a single sentence might take him hours. He played records, tried to read, and his thoughts kept looping. By the time he came out, he was emotionally fragile, slowed down mentally, and unable to look at bright light. The world he came back to didn't quite fit anymore. Modern research has filled in the rest of the picture. Bone density slips a little without daylight driving vitamin D. Serotonin, which is partly regulated by light, drops, and most subjects are clinically depressed within about 3 weeks. Attention and short-term memory measurably decline after about 10 days underground. There's even some imaging work suggesting volume changes in the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex after extended periods in low or no light. The thing nobody really expected is that none of this snaps back. The moment you walk outside, it can take weeks, sometimes months, for the circadian rhythm to fully line up with the world again. People say they feel out of phase for a long time. Some of them say they never feel exactly the way they did before. The body seems to remember darkness in a way it doesn't really remember much else. The most unsettling finding to me is that some of these subjects missed it afterward. They missed the silence, the absence of time, the slower and dreamier version of themselves that had been living underground. Cipher went back into caves more than once across his life, even after he knew exactly what it was costing him. Something kept pulling him down there. Whatever it was, daylight couldn't give it to him. For 300,000 years, your ancestors lived under a sky that did the timekeeping for them. The sun told them when to work and when to stop. The moon told them when to plant and when to hunt. Every cell in your body is still listening for those signals every day, whether you're paying attention or not. The light through your window in the morning isn't only light. It's a message your body has been quietly waiting on for longer than there have been words for it. Take the message away, and you find out something a little uncomfortable. The version of you with a steady sense of time, a stable mood, a working memory, a body that knows when to sleep isn't a self-contained person at all. It's a partnership, an old and slightly fragile one, between you and the sun. In the dark, with the sun gone, you start to meet whoever you are without your half of it. Whoever that is, by every account, isn't someone you've spent much time with before.